Football is just a game, but when you're up against certain players, it's a fight for survival. English football has seen quite a number of tough blokes over the decades, but in the 1980s, it was all about one man, Billy Whitehurst. He was the hardest player to have ever played the game.
Billy Whitehurst, known as the hardest man in football. He was brutal and tough, both on and off the pitch, and he once played a football match with 15 stitches in his face.
Big Bad Billy played for 10 different clubs, but whoever was on the other side of the pitch knew they were in for a full-blooded display. There could only be one outcome for anyone who tried to challenge his authority on the pitch. Whitehurst's career began in the late 1970s, and over the next decade and a half, he quickly developed a reputation for his robust style of play as a striker. He was tall, powerful, and had a no-nonsense style, which sometimes bordered on the violent. He was also a real character in the dressing room, and was the kind of teammate who was always going to motivate you. His presence alone could shift the psychological balance of a game. For example, towards the tail end of Billy's career, Sheffield United boss Dave Bassett needed Whitehurst to put things in order. The club had just gained promotion to the First Division. However, they had players like Brian Deane, who were talented but not exactly tough. One time, Razor Ruddock, a renowned tough defender, was giving Brian Deane a rough time. Realizing Dino needed some help, Bassett brought in Big Bad Billy to take care of business. Whitehurst, who was watching the game as a spectator, decided to have a word with Ruddock at halftime. Dressed in a suit, he confronted Ruddock in the tunnel, warning him to back off Deane. Ruddock replied, "Alright Billy," but Whitehurst was having none of it. He then said, "Kick Deansy one more time, and I'm going to twat you after the match." A shell-shocked Ruddock left Deane alone throughout the second half.
We're playing Southampton at home. Ruddock's absolutely battering Brian Deane all over the place, like bullying him, smashing him and all like that. So I'm sat there, and Harry just looks round and goes, "Go and get Billy." Hey, where can, he's up in stand, go and get him. So Billy sat there in his leather jacket, as you, pair of jeans, pair of boots like that, and I said, "Billy, Harry wants you." He went, "What?" He went, "This is like 5 minutes before half time." But Billy comes down like and gets him thing, and he went, "Right, I need you to have a word with Ruddock at half time." He says he's bullying Brian Deane, and you know Dino's not doing all this shit, scared of him. So they come off at half time, and you all come together, and you can hear Ruddock going to Dino, "Fucking, I've had you in my pocket, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that." Comes down steps, goes up, and next thing you've just heard this whoosh, and Billy's grabbed him and pinned him up against wall. Ruddock's in his Southampton kit, like, "What are you doing?" He says, "If you touch Brian Deane again in second half, go anywhere near him and kick him, I'll be waiting for you in this tunnel to fucking do your legs." And Ruddock goes, "I'm telling you," and grabbed him and just like dropped him. Second half goes on, we win 4-0 and Brian Deane scores 2.
Recounting the incident years later, Ruddock, who is in the conversation for being among the top 5 hardest guys, said that he was intimidated by Whitehurst's presence. But that's just one of the dozens of stories about Big Bad Billy. Another time, Whitehurst broke the jaw of one of the most talented English players of all time, Paul Gascoigne, simply because Gascoigne nutmegged him a number of times. But don't just take my word for it, listen to the man himself.
Gascoigne's the best English player I've ever seen. He was phenomenal. There was nothing he couldn't do. Nothing. You used to get 3,000 watching him in training. Book that I smashed it, I broke his jaw.
Did you?
I didn't break his jaw, no, but he thinks I did. He said he nutmegged me in training. According to his book, he nutmegged me, and I said, "If you do that again, I'll break your jaw." And he did it again, and I broke his jaw. So he says in his book.
Well, so what is the truth then?
Well, the truth is, I didn't break his jaw. I mean,
Simply put, Billy Whitehurst was a menace, and even Martin Keown confirms this. For those who don't know him, Martin Keown was one hell of a footballer back in the day. He was a solid presence in the heart of Arsenal's defense, making over 400 appearances and lifting almost a dozen titles with the Gunners. He, however, recalls an incident where Whitehurst allowed him to win a tackle, only to follow up with a cynical challenge that left Keown with lasting scars afterwards. Keown was at Aston Villa and in his early 20s at the time, but he had to deal with the terror facing Whitehurst. Years later, Keown reflected on what it felt like to play against Big Bad Billy. In his words, it was criminal.
In the early 80s, and some of the guys back then were just, I played against Billy Whitehurst and it was just almost criminal, some of the challenges that you saw.
He was tough though.
It was a different game.
Midway through the 80s, after leaving Newcastle for Oxford United, Whitehurst was offered 2 illegal bare-knuckle fights for £1,000. Things were pretty easy in the first fight, as he got a quick knockout. However, the second one was a dogfight, and Billy sustained facial injuries that required stitches. It was quite a mauling according to Whitehurst, so he had to lie to the manager that he was involved in a car crash. But here's the crazy part. Whitehurst played the very next match with his face stitched up. What an absolute monster. As if engaging in those bare-knuckle fights wasn't enough, Billy decided to hit the streets. He also became embroiled in bar brawls that left him looking like Frankenstein. Billy recalled a particular fight in Oxford and explained what went down. I put my thumb in his eye and smashed his head against the wall. Then his friend pulled out one of those extendable telescopic coshes and hit me straight across the nose. Billy needed lots of stitches to close the big cut, and while playing a few days later, he collided with the keeper, who reopened the cut and ripped some stitches. During half-time, he ripped out all of the stitches to the horror of the Nottingham Forest team. Whitehurst then came back out to play the second half with his nose stapled to the hole in his cheek. Was this guy even real? There was quite some drama during Billy's time at Sheffield United. Out in the Sheffield city centre one night with a group of teammates, they encountered some Wednesday fans, one of whom threw a bottle, which hit David Barnes and cut his face. Billy went over to the culprit and decked him. According to Vinnie Jones, who witnessed the incident, Billy threw one of the best right-handers I've ever seen, inside or outside a prize fighting ring, and the biggest bloke in the group just crumpled to the floor. The fans definitely got what they asked for, didn't they? And what about a match against Arsenal where Whitehurst, who was playing for Oxford at the time, warned Niall Quinn that whoever marked him would regret it? Here's the thing. According to Alan Shearer and Gary Lineker, Whitehurst allowed a couple of free hits before smashing opponents. So if you wanted to tackle him, you were better off using the free trial and not waiting till it expired.
So yeah, Billy Whitehurst, remember Billy Whitehurst as well?
Crikey, Billy Whitehurst was evil, but that was way back.
You know Billy Whitehurst?
I ain't got a clue.
Back when Gary and I were playing, I mean, what was said in the dressing room was make sure you get the first digging.
Really?
And you could tackle then. You were allowed, as a defender,
You could have 3 free hits.
you would have allowed a couple of free hits before you got a yellow card.
As expected, an intimidated Quinn quickly passed on the responsibility to his teammate David O'Leary. Safe to say, Quinn wanted no smoke from the big man. Whitehurst developed a considerable reputation in the football world. Vinnie Jones, also known for being a tough lad, ranked Whitehurst above every other hard man in the game. In one interview with Sportsmail in 2015, Vinnie was asked what it was like to be the hardest man in football. Jones pointed towards Whitehurst and said, "You best ask that man." It tells you just how much respect Vinnie had for Whitehurst. One time, someone pranked Vinnie, and he was ready to have a go at the person. But then he turned back and realized it was Whitehurst. Vinnie just sat down, smiled, and then went back to what he was doing. But it wasn't just Vinnie. Former Liverpool and Scotland captain Alan Hansen wrote in his autobiography about Whitehurst. He was 6 feet tall and weighed more than 13 stone, and he knew how to exploit this. Indeed, because of his power in the air, aggression, and courage, he was one of the opposing strikers who frightened me the most, and I do mean frightened. Hansen said that at the beginning of every season, he would look for Oxford, or whoever Whitehurst was playing for, because it was a nightmare playing against him. Jamie Redknapp also spoke about facing Whitehurst and what it looked like. It was my debut for Bournemouth at Hull in 1990. My dad was the manager and we were winning 4-0. He said to me, "You're going on, just avoid that maniac Whitehurst." I remember thinking, this is going to be great. Then I looked at Billy and he had steam coming out of his ears because they were getting beat, and he was after anyone. According to Redknapp, it was a baptism of fire as a 16-year-old, and to this day, he still swears that Whitehurst is the scariest person he has ever faced. Mark Lawrenson also agrees that the hardest striker he ever played against was definitely Billy Whitehurst. He had more clubs than hot dinners, says Lawrenson. If you had a problem with constipation, then knowing Whitehurst was in the opposite dressing room was an instant cure. I remember going to Oxford in March 1987 after they'd been promoted. Alan Hansen spotted his name on the team sheet and asked, "Who's Billy Whitehurst?" I told him he would soon find out. It was even tougher for goalkeepers. According to David Besant, former Wimbledon goalkeeper, every cross you came for, you knew you were going to get hit, even if he had no chance of winning the ball. If you stopped coming, then he had won, so you just had to keep getting hit. 99 goals across 454 appearances between 1977 and 1993 might not be the most eye-catching stat today, but Whitehurst knew how to play football. He may have developed a reputation as the most feared footballer, and many of the stories you hear would be about Whitehurst ripping opponents' jerseys or players shitting their pants at the thought of facing him. What if I told you that there were matches where Billy Whitehurst was actually the best player on the pitch? Whether he was at Hull, Newcastle, Oxford or Sheffield, it was the exact same thing you were getting, 120% effort in each game.